What's up guys, this is Tony with Salt Strong, and I want to show you some basic things you can do to help maintain your reel and keep it running smooth. Now this video is not going to go into detail on the internal cleaning of a reel. I leave that up to the professionals. Usually when you start taking apart a reel and get to the insides, you end up doing more harm than good if you don't know what you're doing. And also if you use the wrong grease. Some reels have a specific grease that needs to be used, so it just becomes a big ordeal. But if you want to keep the main, components of your reel on the outside running smooth, here are a few tips to do that. So first off, the reel that I'm using here, this is a 3000 BGMQ, Daiwa BGMQ. Great reel for inshore, and these reels are great for throwing artificials or using live or dead or cut bait. I've used it for both and have caught some pretty decent sized fish on this. Everything from, your slot sized trout and redfish to your big bull sized redfish over 40 inches. So great reel and application for that. And in case you are interested, we do sell these on our shop page at fishstrong.com. And if you're one of our insider members, you do get a free line spooling and also free shipping on these reels and all of our reels on the shop page. So definitely be sure to take advantage of that. So as far as what you need to get this job done, first you're going to want a clean cloth or a clean rag, a spray bottle with some fresh water, fresh clean water in there, a small screwdriver just in case you do have to take your roller bearing out, which I'll show you here in a little bit, and then also some oil. Now this is Lew's reel oil. I like this bottle because it comes with this very precise applicator tip to get into those tighter spaces. So very good and useful to use this. Now first thing you're going to want to do is to get any dirt and salt off the reel. So what I like to do is use a clean rag. I don't like to spray the reel directly because that'll get water into tight spaces and possible spots that you're going to end up putting oil into. So spray the rag and then wipe the reel down with the rag. So you don't need a bunch of water, just enough to damp the rag a little bit. And then just going to do a light wipe down of the reel, getting any extra salt deposits and dirt off the reel, just like so. And I highly recommend doing this after every trip as well, not just every now and then. Do this after every trip and you'll see a huge difference in how much your reels will just work better and look better down the road. So we have it wiped down, then I'll use the dry side of the rag to dry it off. And now we are ready to start oiling some key spots of the reel. So the first thing I like to work on first is the handle. So some reel handles you can spin them off, or you'll have to unscrew the bolt on the opposite side to get them off. Either way, take both sides off. Take the cap or take the bolt off the one side, and then take the reel handle off of the other side. And you're going to notice there is a bearing on each side of the reel. There's a small bearing in there on either side, and you'll take your oil and just put a small drop in there. You don't want to flood the bearing. You just want to put a small drop. A little bit of oil goes a long way. So small drop on one side, small drop on the other side, and then we will put the handle back together, making sure everything is snug. Also doesn't hurt to put a dab of oil on the threads where the reel handle screws onto, like so. Just put a dab of oil on there, that way it doesn't seize up over time on those threads in there. So we'll just put the handle back on, like so. Make sure it's nice and snug. And now that is done. Next thing I'll want to do, if you happen to have a joint on the arm, unscrew the handle. That way the joint is loose, and put a dab of oil on that joint, and also put it around where the actual handle meets the arm. So we'll just put a dab of oil on there. Spin the handle a bit and wipe off any excess oil that may be on there. And the handle is now good to go. Next up, I will work on the spool. So I'll take the spool off. The only thing you're going to worry about here is the shaft of the spool. So we'll take that off, and when you do take the spool off, be careful not to lose any washers that may be. Sometimes they'll get stuck to the bottom of the spool. Make sure there's no washers stuck on there that you might end up losing. Don't see any, so we'll just put that aside. And what you'll want to do, I like to spin the reel so that the shaft is out at its highest. You know, it's pushed out the most, and I'll just put a dab, just a small little drop of oil on that shaft, and then just reel it a couple times, and that will get the oil into the reel there. And now that is good to go. So you can put your reel back on. Another thing to do is make sure there's no dirt and debris underneath the spool. If there is, use a can of air, you know, compressed air in a can to spray it out, or just use a rag to wipe it out. Make sure there's no dirt or debris in there, because over time that can get onto the shaft and eventually into the reel. Then we'll just put our reel back on, our spool, like so. And then the last thing I will focus on is the bail. Wherever you have a joint that moves, such as on either side of the bail where the screws are, I will put some oil on there. So on the outside of the screw, like so. And then on the joint itself, just let that oil sort of seep its way into the joint. Same thing on the other side. Let it work its way in there. Then just open and close the bail a few times. Work that oil in there. And then wipe off any excess. And then the last thing to do is your roller bearing here. Now what I prefer to do is to actually take the bearing out. So let's carefully do that. Whenever you do this, make sure that you don't lose any pieces. I like to do this on, you know, a nice clean surface where I can see if any pieces fall off. But you'll just unscrew that screw that is on the opposite side, as I'm doing right now. Take that screw out. Again, make sure you don't lose any pieces. Pull the screw out, put it somewhere safe where it doesn't roll away and fall off. Then we will take that roller bearing out. So here is that roller and the roller bearing that I just took off of the reel. As you notice, there's a little gap there. That's where I want to put a little bit of oil. So I'm just going to dab some oil into that gap. And then something to also consider is to make sure the actual area, the surface where your line rolls, there is no debris on there, there's no corrosion. If there's corrosion on there, you're going to notice your line either breaking or getting frayed up or torn up very quickly, because the roller bearing, aside from the rod tip, is where the most pressure the line is applied. So if your line is rubbing on something rough, it's going to break and you're going to lose a lot of fish. So now we'll carefully put this back in. Just like so. Pops in there easily. Put the screw back in and we should be good to go. Then once everything is oiled up and we're good to go, I'll just go through and make sure all the screws on the reel are nice and snug. Last thing you want are screws falling off and pieces falling off your reel while you're using it. You don't want to over tighten anything too much, but just make sure everything is nice and snug so nothing falls off. And then the very last thing I do when I go to put my reel back on my rod is I will put a little bit, just one drop of oil, on the base of the reel. And this allows, just rub it around a little bit, this keeps you know, your reel from possibly getting corroded and stuck to your actual rod, wherever you put the reel into the rod. So just a little tip there to keep that from getting corroded and stuck, because if you've ever noticed, if you leave a reel on for a long time, you go to take it off, sometimes it'll get stuck on that rod. So just something to help avoid that. Just put one little drop of oil on there to keep it from getting stuck and corroded. So hopefully these tips can help you out to keep your reel lasting longer and running smoothly. Again, I do this about once a month when it comes to oiling the reel, and then after every trip, I will rinse it down with fresh water, you know, just a light rinse of fresh water on a rag, and then dry it off completely. As you can see, this reel here, I've had it for a little over a year and it's still running super smooth just by doing these simple steps every trip and then at least once a month. And again, if you are interested in this reel, this is the Daiwa BG-MQ in 3000 size. Highly recommend the 3000 or the 2500 size if you're fishing inshore for redfish, sea trout, flounder, snook, black drum, or even small tarpon. This reel can work very well for all those applications. And you can pick it up at our shop page, fishstrong.com. And if you are one of our insider members, keep in mind that you do get free line spooling on all reels that you purchase. So definitely be sure to take advantage of that to save some money. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to drop them down below. Also, if you have any additional tips you would like to share when it comes to some weekly or monthly maintenance on your reels, definitely let us know in the comments down below.